Prime Minister's trip to Iceland apparently left him with an understanding of how to make a duck out of Lego. But other European leaders didn't get much of an insight into how he might solve another puzzle, the UK's relationship with the EU. Maybe they will be enlightened later this week when the Chancellor speaks in Berlin, putting a little more flesh on the bare bones of the government's plans. But much hangs on a letter the Prime Minister has promised he will send to other European Union leaders early this month, perhaps in the next few days. In it, he will set out what exactly he wants to change. I've been to Strasbourg, the home of the European Parliament, to see what the mood is there towards Mr Cameron's potential wish list. Morning Mass in Strasbourg Cathedral, Romanesque and Gothic, French and German influences. The building, like the city, is witness to a struggle and perhaps to its resolution. To some, this ancient city, first French, then German, then French again, is more of a vision than a simple symbol. After centuries of a blood-soaked tussle between Europe's two biggest powers, it's now home to the European Parliament.
After changing nationality so many times, the city of Strasbourg was chosen as one of the European capitals when the Council of Europe was established in 1949. Just imagine. A European capital founded hardly 4 years after the end of the Second World War. What a beacon of hope. What a powerful symbol.
But David Cameron evidently wants a Europe less propelled towards a common destiny by past horrors and political romanticism, something more workaday, more practical. But there's an impatience here. Pervenche Berès, leader of the French Socialists in Parliament, says it's like a Beckett play.
Everybody waits for Cameron, but Cameron doesn't come. Maybe it's clear in David Cameron's head, but I have not seen it up to now. It's a bit weird to open a negotiation and to be sure what you will obtain in the end, because in a negotiation you start by asking questions or to have a claim, but what happened in the end, well, it depends on the outcome of the negotiation. Huh?
There's indeed not only an irritation, but an incomprehension at Mr Cameron's reluctance to set out his wares. In the Strasbourg flea market, the goods are on display. Bells and brass, old light fittings, metal toys and coloured wine glasses. And we do know something of what Mr Cameron will be displaying. He wants to get rid of the idea of ever closer union, which has been there since the very beginning, the very first paragraph of the Treaty of Rome, and also to abolish the idea that the euro should be an automatic, if long-term, destiny for all EU countries. Inside the Parliament, the members' bar is the place for political gossip and serious debate. Here I asked the Conservative Sajjad Karim if he can persuade another MEP, Czech Vice President of the Liberal group, Pavel Telička, around to David Cameron's point of view. A mini renegotiation, if you like.
The natural distinguishing point here has to be Eurozone and non-Eurozone. And whilst you are always now going to be on this trajectory of ever closer union within the Eurozone, it means that non-Eurozone countries, you do have a two-speed Europe that has emerged there, and non-Eurozone countries can engage in the integration processes where appropriate and necessary for them, and it can be an individual choice where appropriate, and where there isn't a need for them to go along with that, then of course they're outside it anyway.
Clearly there is and will be a distinction between Eurozone and non-Eurozone countries, and in fact we do have not a two-speed Europe, we have a multi-speed Europe. I think that if we would go into details, maybe we would find a line of some disagreements, but in broad terms I have no problem with that. Now the other important issue is what I hear quite often from the UK. I'm not saying that it's from the Prime Minister or the government and so on. I mean issues that are being raised concern, for example, free movement of persons. I mean this is for me a part of the internal market.
Sure.
If that is something that we would start to dig in, then I think that this is not only extremely difficult, but I would find it as a distortion of the internal market.
When it comes to the single market, we are the biggest champions of completing the single market. And the idea...
You also highly profit from it.
Yeah, of course we do. I agree with you completely on that. For me to be able to argue that actually Brits should have the right to go anywhere they like in the European Union, but other EU citizens shouldn't have the same right to access the United Kingdom. It's an unachievable ambition. But on the other hand, you do have this issue of should a member of one EU member state have the right, without having contributed, to go and access benefits in another member state? Now, that is a point upon which actually there isn't a huge need for negotiation at all. And equally, we in the United Kingdom have got to start recognising that actually our benefit system is seen as a problem in other member states because it is far too easy and far too attractive.
Well, that's a much more complicated issue, I would say. If the UK would decide, for some reasons, to make the social system less attractive, fine. But I mean, to single out, those that, by the way, contribute enormously. You're getting people that were educated elsewhere. Someone is losing out because they come to the UK, they start to work there, and many of them will probably stay once and for all. So for me, the question of equal treatment and non-discrimination is absolutely important.
The outside of the European Parliament looms circular and shiny. I've always thought it looks rather like a particularly imposing flying saucer. Its way of doing business must indeed seem alien to David Cameron, and the powers that be in Brussels would be keen on bypassing the MEPs when it comes to this renegotiation. British Conservative MEP Sajjad Karim says no one here will put up with that.
To try and do this without the European Parliament, forget it. It's a non-starter. So anybody that's trying to push things in that direction really is pushing towards failure.
It must be about 7 years since I've been inside the Parliament, and it's making me feel quite nostalgic. It's all coming flooding back. The big open space down the centre with jungle plants going from top to ceiling. The weird staircase that looks like something out of MC Escher. But if the Parliament building hasn't changed much, Europe has in that time. It's not just that it's been rocked by a series of crises that have got much worse this year, but also the growth of Euroscepticism, the cynicism about the whole project has really grown as well in each of the member countries. Just walking past some magnificent abstract art into an exhibition hall where one of the posters says, "A shared history, a common destiny." But is that, if it was ever true now? Is David Cameron onto something? Might other countries want a much looser vision of Europe or the European Union? That is what worries Pavel Telicha about the idea of the euro not being the automatic destiny of all countries, that it fuels fires at home.
For me, this would be something that would be opening a Pandora box. There are countries that are not a part of Eurozone, like the Czech Republic, and I think that if it is tabled, I think it is opening a Pandora box for us, for a lot of unnecessary Czech populism, when we would be losing focus on the issues that are absolutely crucial in terms of the interests of the Czech Republic or the future of the European Union.
Inside Britain's Pandora's box, a couple of Chimera, an Enigma, and several jumbo-packed family-sized cans of worms. Everything wittingly or unwittingly plays into other people's games. With many governments keen on further economic integration, the chair of the influential Economic Monetary Affairs Committee, the Italian socialist Roberto Galtieri, welcomes the move to clarify Britain's position as firmly, permanently, outside the euro.
The reality is that the euro is the currency of the majority of the country of the Union, but there are some countries that, especially the UK, that are not going to join the euro. So I think that is correct and is possible to allow a level of, we call, differentiated integration within the Union. And I don't know if it's going to change the nature of the Union, because it's already here. I see this more a recognition of reality.
You might expect those who want out altogether to agree with some of Mr Cameron's aims, but UKIP MEP Diane James says the idea of stripping out ever closer union is just a nonsense. Of course, we all know that you want to get out completely, but getting rid of ever closer union, getting rid of the automatic destiny of the euro. From your point of view, aren't those things you'd applaud?
No, not at all. We had Mrs. Merkel, Mr. Hollande here literally earlier in October. They set out a very, very clear plan in terms of their speeches as to where the European Union is going. There's no deflection whatsoever from this issue of closer harmonisation, single government, single defence forces, single monetary policy, single absolutely everything. Now, a lot of those issues have been shown to be problematic for the UK, so why on earth would we want to shackle ourselves to something that frankly is embarked on a route that's negative?
You get the feeling from some that this renegotiation could amount to sweeping British debris out of the road. David McAllister is a German MEP from Angela Merkel's party, and he's close to the Chancellor, who's the most powerful single individual in this negotiation.
The ever closer union of peoples, as mentioned in the Treaty of Lisbon, is an important political concept for us in Germany, for the French, for, I would say, nearly all EU member states. But we do understand that the British are no longer interested in following this concept. I think we can find a good solution. If the British don't want to follow the concept of an ever closer union, that will, on the other hand, mean that other countries are allowed to integrate further. We already have a more flexible Europe. 22 EU member states are in the Schengen area, 6 aren't. We have 19 now who share the joint currency. Others haven't introduced the euro yet or don't want to introduce the euro. So there will be a new dimension of this more flexible Europe. We will wait and see if the concept of a flexible Europe works, but I believe in the moment it's the only solution to fit the British demands.
I'm going up in the lift to see an important player. Mr. Cameron is not exactly pushing at an open door, but his demands don't shock anyone, and that could be a problem. There's no wow factor, no pizzazz, no headline-grabbing idea, something dramatic, symbolic, that could change some British hearts and minds, or at least votes. But what about this? I've been told the Foreign Secretary has discussed the idea of associate membership for Britain with senior European politicians, and it was floated again in the Sun this week. The former Belgian Prime Minister, enthusiastic federalist and leader of the Liberal group here, Guy Verhofstadt, thinks there's something in it.
Britain has already an opt-out for a number of issues, the euro, Schengen, justice and home affairs, and apparently they want to have more opt-outs, for example, on the idea of an ever closer union. And the key question is naturally, how many opt-outs can you have and be still member of the European Union? And is it maybe not better to use for that the idea of a full membership and an associated membership to clarify this? Because we cannot continue with an Europe à la carte. Certainly when you look to the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in Syria, this Europe has no future, and this Europe, the actual European Union, has no future. It's a mess for the moment in Europe. It's not capable, the European Union, to even deal with the refugee crisis, with the euro crisis, with our geopolitical weakness. So, or we go back into the old-style nation states and we make a loose confederation of nation states, what is a possibility, or we make a jump forward. And maybe we have to use a request of David Cameron as the platform to discuss this. And maybe the idea of a full membership for those who want a full membership and an associated membership, we have tens and tens of opt-ins and opt-outs. It's chaotic for the moment, the European Union. And it doesn't work because we have obese European institutions, a European Commission of 28, where everybody knows that you only need 12 or 15 commissioners. And they have nothing to say because finally every decision is taken by unanimity by the heads of states and governments.
But I'm not clear what associated members would mean. What sort of rights would they
being
have?
part in the internal market, because the internal market is then open for all the associated members. And if an associated member wants to do more, for example, on foreign policy, they could do it. But that seems to me better that you make two types of membership than the tens of different types of membership we have today.
So very similar to what some Eurosceptics, there are lots of different varieties and colours of what people want in Britain, but some people say, yes, free trade area, yes, nothing else.
Free trade area can also be foreign policy if you want to do to cooperate in foreign policy, things like that. But it's completely different of what Eurosceptics are saying. We want to destroy Europe. We want to get rid of the European Union.
Would Britain lose some voting rights in some areas under this?
It is not necessary to create new institutions, but it's clear then that if you're not involved in the monetary policy, because you have your own currency, you not vote on the legislation on the Eurozone. That's as simple as that. If you don't want to participate in a certain policy, you don't vote on that policy.
Guy de Verhofstadt. Previously unpublished